Hey everyone, please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
The world of Greyhawk has a great variety of deities and gods and goddesses and so forth, and I want to do a quick overview today on Greyhawk Ragnar. So it's interesting to note that when the World of Greyhawk was first published in the folio, it didn't include anything about gods and goddesses. It just had the kingdoms and some history and a few miscellaneous things here and there, but nothing about deities. You were pretty much expected to just make your own pantheon and plug it in, or use one or more of the historical pantheons in deities and demigods and use that. Later on in Dragon Magazine, Gary Gygax started to write articles detailing some of the deities of Greyhawk. And these articles were really popular, and they kept going with them. Len Lakofka eventually did some articles on another one of the pantheons, which I'll get to in a sec. And they eventually made their way into the gold box set, which was the main thing that most Greyhawk fans were using back in the 80s as the setting for the first half of the decade. And I just wanted to go through the general gist of the gods. I'm not going to go through every single god that was detailed there. There are a little over 60 of them, so it would make this video a lot longer than I want it to be. But I just want to give a general overview of some of the highlights of the deities. First thing, they're broken out into a number of different pantheons, which is very nice. There's the Iridian pantheon, which corresponds to the Iridian people who migrated into the Flanaess more than 1,000 years ago. The Sulois pantheon, which was the gods and goddesses of the Sul Imperium, which got destroyed and started the migrations into the Flanaess. It's now called the Sea of Dust because it just got completely obliterated. There's the Flan pantheon for the Flanay people, who were the natives, the aboriginal people in the Flanaess before the migrations. The Baklunish, which is up in the upper northwest corner of the continent. They didn't really migrate all that much. They did in the north and kind of created the northern nomads that are up there, but they didn't really penetrate too far in, although some of their gods did. There's also a couple that are unknown origin, which is a nice little mystery thing. And there's also common deities, and the common deities fall in two categories. They're common deities with a pantheon, so you could be like Iridian and common, which means that it was an Iridian god that slowly diffused and became accepted by everyone. And there's also just common deities that just, as far as human history and memory go, they were always in everybody else's pantheon. So there was no distinct point of origin for them. And I love that. I love it when Greyhawk gets messy like that, because it really feels more like the real world than when you have these absolute clean demarcations. When you have this kind of thing where sometimes it's common, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's from one pantheon, sometimes it's not, it really gives you an idea that there really is a lot of stuff going on in the background, and there's a lot of complicated history that we just don't know anymore. And I love that kind of thing, because it really gives you some opportunities as a DM to explore those oddities and come up with your own explanations for them. And sometimes they can be really interesting. But just to go through it, I'm just going to go through some of the highlights. Originally, they were broken out into greater gods, lesser gods, and demigods, which is interesting because they later on in the From the Ashes, they introduced the concept of the intermediate god. Here, there was only one. There was Sindor, who is listed as a greater/lesser god. But I kind of liked. I liked it when Sindor was the only one like that, because again, it's messy and it puts him into kind of a weird status, which makes him special, which I kind of like. But there's Biori, the Earth Mother, the goddess of nature and rain. She originally started with the Flan peoples and was adopted by everybody. And you'll find that every one of the Flan deities is also a common deity, which is a neat touch. Bakob is the god of magic. He's also the master of Zagyig, the mad archmage who created the dungeons beneath Castle Greyhawk. Um, there's Istis, the Baklunish goddess of fate and destiny. There's a whole module named after her, Fate of Istis. She looms large over the setting for obvious reasons. The goddess of fate is going to be very well known. Nerul is another one, the god of death, darkness, and the underworld. He shows up in one of the Gord the Rogue novels. Tharizdun is an unknown deity. He looms large across the setting, and gets more important as the setting goes on because more and more authors wanted to use him because he's such a cool idea. And there's the Lost Temple of Tharizdun is a very famous module, which I actually did a whole video about earlier on. There is then the lesser; those are all greater gods. There's lesser gods like Celestian, the god of stars and space and wanderers and so forth. There's his brother Farlongen, who is the god of the horizons and distance and travel, but walking. And they have a couple of neat interactions in the descriptions of how they view the universe and travels and so forth. There's Ilona of the forest, who's, obviously the goddess of forest, flowers, and meadows. She's very associated with nature and so forth. Ironius and Hextor are two brothers. One's good, one's evil, with 6 arms. They're both gods of war and so forth. Much later on, when they introduced the chainmail game in I think 2001, they introduced a third brother called Stratus, who died at the beginning of that setting's period, and they that's how they linked in the far western part of the continent to what's going on in the Flanaess, and they kind of set up that whole thing called the Sundered Empire. And but it is very firmly rooted in the Flanaess because they make that connection with the deities. There's let's see here. Obad High is the god of nature, wildlands, freedom, and hunting. And you can notice there's a bunch of overlap. There's many deities that share the same kind of portfolio. And I, again, like that because it can set up rivalries. Even if they have sympathetic alignments and so forth, the fact that there are two deities that pretty much do the same thing it makes it, by definition, it's going to be a little, there's going to be a little friction there. There's going to be some rivalry. Olamadara, Olamad Oladamara. I always mess that up. Music, revelry, roguery, and wine. There's Foltus of the blinding light, the god of light, resolution, and law. He's always presented as a straight-laced, very stern kind of character. The one of the countries, the Theocracy of the Pale, actually is a theocracy of Foltus, and he's lawful good / neutral. And he has a great rivalry with Saint Cuthbert, I did a video on him not too long ago, who's also a god of wisdom, dedication, zeal. He's also very, lawful good, kind of straight laced, kind of deity. And Gygax used both of those to kind of do send ups of certain religious things in the real world, which is kind of an interesting way to do. Kind of a very light critique of things. Foltus, as I recall, was also based on something from Firesign Theater. One of the songs they did, he kind of adapted to Foltus. "Oh, Blinding Light," they did as kind of like the hymn to Foltus, which is kind of cool. There's Tritherion, the god of individuality, liberty, and retribution, which is an odd addition in there. But a lot of adventurers like Tritherion because god of freedom and liberty kind of lends itself to wandering adventurers. Then there are the demigods. There's Ayuz, who is the evil Cambion, which is a half demon, half human god of oppression, deceit, and pain. He actually rules his own land, and later on in the setting, in the history, he wages a war and conquers a huge swath of territory, and he's beat back a little, but he's a very big one. Wastri, the hopping prophet, which is one of my favorite deities, and they've done almost nothing with him. He was featured in one page adventure that came in the City of Greyhawk box set. It's called Bath Time for the Hopping Prophet, and I loved it. It was great. He's a great character, and I wish they had done more with him. I have some ideas in the back of my mind, and I will eventually be writing some Wastri modules, but that's in the future. And finally, the last one I'm going to mention is Zagig, who is the god of humor, occult studies, and eccentricity. He's the demigod who was an archmage and ascended to demigodhood, and created the dungeons beneath Castle Greyhawk. So he's obviously a very central character in the setting. So now I am in the process of doing videos on individual gods and goddesses. There is a whole playlist of that. I will contrive to put a link to that in the description or in the pinned comment or something. But it gives you an idea, just the broadest of ideas of the scope of the pantheons of Greyhawk. There are a lot more gods than I mentioned here, obviously. So, there's plenty of places to get that kind of information. If you go on to greyhawkgrognard.com, in the free resources section, you'll find an entire book of deities of gods of Greyhawk, which goes into detail on 5th edition D&D specialty priests and new spells and stuff like that. So feel free to download that. It's interesting to note that in the world of Greyhawk, that was the first time we actually saw the notion of specialty priests in 1st edition AD&D, where if you were a priest of if you were a cleric of a particular god, you would pay an extra 10% or 5% of your experience points, and you'd get some extra spells or some special power, and sometimes you'd get them at different levels, and that was the seed of what we have today, where there are a lot of variations on clerics, and each god has certain domains of spells and so forth. All that stuff originated with the with that notion of specialty clerics that we saw in 1st edition. So. Like I say, I'm still doing my series on individual deities, so if you want more details to drill down, do check out that playlist. I'm constantly adding to it, and of course there's stuff on the website. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. Please let me know what you think in the comments. How much have you involved? Not the deities directly necessarily, but maybe some of their frictions of their respective religions and how they get along and so forth. I'd love to hear it. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you all later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.